So in December of 2021, I thru hiked 450 kilometers on the GR131. The GR131 is a long distance trail that crosses the Canary Islands, and the Canary Islands are a set of autonomous islands that are a part of Spain. Due to logistical issues and time constraints, I wasn't able to actually complete the GR131 in its full entirety, and I had to miss out on La Palma and El Hierro. I spent most nights wild camping, but I also spent a few nights in Airbnbs as well as hotels. It took me about 20 days to hike the whole 450 kilometers, plus a few forced rest days due to logistical issues with the ferries. So in this video, I'm going to reflect on my experience on the trail, as well as discussing this list of topics to hopefully help answer some questions that you have about the GR131. Hopefully I can provide you with some helpful information so that if you do decide to tackle the GR131 or just any hiking on the Canary Islands, that you can be prepared and have a fantastic experience out on the trail just like I did. My film series of the actual hike is linked above as well as below in the description. You'll also find links to the gear that I used whilst on the trail, the Cicerone guidebook I used, and also a written trip report that I made on my website. So I thought we'd start with everyone's favourite topic, gear. Big Agnes Copper Spur ULV1. An absolute game changer for me has been my Big Agnes Copper Spur ULV1. It compresses and stuffs down into my pack very efficiently, and it only weighs around 1 kilogram, including the poles and the tent pegs. Inside it's not very wide, but sitting up in the tent you have plenty of headspace, which at 6'1", I really appreciate. Setup and packing down is very quick and efficient. You can sleep without the fly on and stare up at the sky, but I tend to put it on just because I don't really want to be getting up in the middle of the night because of rain. It has a very small footprint, which is very helpful for wild camping, and I also opted to get the ground sheet as well. It isn't the most resilient tent, especially if you were to compare it to my previous tent, which was the Hillyberg Acto. Now, most people know that that tent is a bit of a bomb shelter and can go through absolutely anything, but for me, the trade-off to have less resilience for less volume and less weight is worth it. Adam Pack's custom 45 litre Mo. Another favourite of mine has been my 45 litre Adam Pack's custom Mo Rucksack. It's made here in the UK, and its design is just so simple and functional that I doubt I will ever swap to another pack brand again. So it has one big main compartment which holds the majority of my gear, which I also line with a DCF pack liner for waterproofing, 2 side pockets for water bottles and tent poles and pegs, 1 elastic front pocket to hold snacks, coffee and other small items or cold or rain weather gear, 1 elastic bottom pocket to hold my rubbish or other small snacks, 1 belt pocket to hold my wallet and cash, AirPods and lip balm, and 1 strap pocket to hold my phone. The main compartment can be folded and compressed down with straps, meaning it can double up as a day bag quite well. Brooks Men's Cascadia 16 Trail Runners. So another must-have piece of gear for me. These shoes are just incredibly comfortable and light, and I've never had any foot or ankle related issues whilst I've had these shoes. They have good grip and they allow me to walk further and faster. They do get wet easily, but they also dry very quickly. I've said this in the past, but these shoes are obviously not as resilient as a good pair of quality hiking boots, but the trade-off of being lighter, quicker and not having any foot related issues with these shoes is worth it for me. I think these shoes were perfect for the dry, rocky landscapes that I was walking through on the Canary Islands. Pair these shoes with some merino wool, done tough hiking socks and you've got yourself a match made in heaven. Thermalite sleeping pad, Cumulus quilt and my silk liner. My Thermalite sleeping pad is a perfect balance of weight, comfort and warmth, but it obviously has the price tag to accompany that. Paired with my Cumulus quilt, which is rated at a minimum comfort level of 2 degrees, was a perfect combination for the weather climate on the Canary Islands, which rarely got below 4 degrees. I also used my silk liner to keep my quilt and sleeping pad nice and clean. It also acted to give me a little bit of extra warmth on those chilly nights. Patagonia Capilene Air Hoodie, bottoms, sun hoodie and cap. Protect the clear base layer. This blend of merino wool and polyester was a favourite of mine on the trail. When used as a thermal, it keeps me very warm and it wicks moisture extremely efficiently. Probably the best thermal that I've ever had. And again, it's got the price tag to accompany that. I have the ped bottoms as well, which I didn't use too much on this trip. Maybe once or twice on Tenerife, but I'm sure they'll come in handy quite a bit on the next few trips that I have coming up. My sun hoodie, inspired by Craig Adams, keeps me free of sunburn, which I am very susceptible to. Considering I had constant sun except for maybe 1 or 2 days and I was hiking through desert, this piece of clothing got quite a bit of use. I paired this with my Nike trail running cap, which has an anti-reflective layer on the bottom side of the brim, which obviously helps keep the sun out of my eyes. Sony a7 Mark III, plus my Sony 16 to 35mm lens, plus my NTG Rode shotgun mic. I use my Sony a7 Mark III to capture the majority of the footage that I take. It's got great low light performance, and I also love its photo and video quality. I have about 4 batteries for it, which each last around 1 day. I also use my iPhone 13 in ProRes to get some footage. It's not quite the same as the a7 Mark III, but just being able to whip out the phone and start filming is quite convenient. I'm enjoying using a zoom lens now. It allows me to get some tighter shots when I need it, and it also allows me to focus in on prominent features in a shot, such as a peak or a trail or a certain feature of a landscape. I capture audio with my Rode NTG shotgun mic, which is what I'm using right now actually. And I also use this dead cat when I'm out on the trail to help reduce wind noise. I use my DJI Air 2S to capture aerial footage. Previously I used the Mini 2 on my Skytrail hike. Recently I decided to upgrade to the Air 2S due to its better performance and low light, and also the better quality video and photo. I generally use it to get establishing footage for my videos, but I'm also using it to get photos for my Instagram reels, my stories, my posts, as well as putting it on my website when I'm doing a trip report. And I'm also putting together some prints, which I'll be using some of those photos for as well. Coming from the Mini 2, the Air 2S is slightly heavier and larger, but well worth it for the amazing quality and footage that you can get from the Air 2S. I got the Fly More combo, which comes with 3 batteries. It also comes with a cord to let you use those batteries as a power bank to charge up your phone and other electronics. Just a quick note, the Canary Islands are covered in beautiful national parks, which you're not allowed to fly a drone in. There's a very handy map tool that I used on the Spanish government's website, which labels all of the areas where you're not allowed to fly your drone, which is what I was using during my time on the islands. Personally, I also try to avoid flying my drone anywhere near people or residential areas. There are also a few extra rules that you're going to want to know, so check the Spanish government's website to find out. Anchor power bank. This power bank has been with me on all of my hikes for the past 2 years. It's been extremely reliable and gives my iPhone 13 about 4 or 5 charges and 3 or 4 charges to my Sony a7 Mark III batteries. I also have a Garmin InReach Mini at hand, basically there just for safety in the worst case scenario. I also use the preset text to send messages to family and friends to let them know where I am on the trail when I haven't got reception. The device itself isn't cheap, and you also have to pay a subscription fee when the device is in use, which you can pause when you're not hiking. I think it's worth it as it lets me travel to more isolated and desolate places with peace of mind, knowing that if the worst was to happen, I can contact emergency services. It's also very small and weighs practically nothing. So there are some items of gear that I haven't spoken about today, but if you want to know more, you can watch my gear video, which is linked above and also below in the description, or you can just head over to my website and have a browse of the items of gear that I own and that I use. Again, link below. Wild camping. So I should start off by saying that wild camping in the Canary Islands, like the rest of Spain, is a bit of a grey area. Now, it's illegal in the national parks, so I myself stayed well away from the national parks and villages and towns. I also set my tent up after sunset and also got packed up before sunrise, and obviously I didn't leave any trace. I myself didn't have any issues with wild camping as I was adhering to these principles. Lanzarote was extremely difficult to find a pitch. There's not much vegetation, and what vegetation is present is usually farmers' crops. Fuerteventura had more viable options because of its mountains, but it still had very little greenery and was quite desolate. Gran Canaria, Tenerife and La Gomera are very green and mountainous and provide lots of options to pitch a tent. When I wasn't wild camping, I stayed in either Airbnbs or hotels, and this was normally at the beginning or the end of an island, where sometimes I had to wait a whole day for a ferry. Navigation. I use my iPhone 13 Pro Max with downloaded maps on the All Trails application to help guide me along the trail. I opted for the Max version of the iPhone 13 Pro as the battery life is just insane. I also had a bit of a close encounter with my iPhone 10 failing on me in Hornstrandia which is a very remote location in Iceland. And ever since then, I knew I just had to upgrade my phone from a safety perspective. I love the All Trails app and your ability to download these maps offline. Without it, I just don't think I'd be able to do the hikes that I do. I also use the official Cicerone guidebook written by, I believe, Paddy Dillon. I found this guidebook really helpful when planning my ferry crossings, planning my days, planning where I was going to pitch a tent, and also where I was going to resupply my water and food. Food and water. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any twist top gas on the island for my jet boil, so I had to rely on room temperature water to soak my freeze-dried meals and also to cold drip my coffee. For food, I brought with me 6 freeze-dried meals by Firepot. Now, I've had these Firepot meals before with boiling water and they are just absolutely delicious. When I ran out of these meals, I simply relied on bread, cheese and chorizo, which I got from some of the local shops in the villages that I passed through. Whenever I passed through a bigger town or a village, I would generally stop off at a cafeteria or a restaurant and get a decent sized meal with some vegetables. If you've watched my videos of the hikes, you probably know I have a coffee addiction as well. For snacks, I simply purchased mixed nuts, crackers, peanut butter, and some chocolate. There are no natural water sources on the island, so I had to rely on purchased bottled water, and also there were a few towns that had some taps that I could fill my water bottles at. Logistics. So I flew from London to Lanzarote and stayed in an Airbnb in the capital. The next morning I got a bus to the most northern part of Lanzarote and commenced the GR131 from there, which is the official starting point. Buses are frequent around all of the islands and I found them to be very reliable as well. Getting from one island to another required the use of the ferry services. Now, there are a few companies that you can go with, but I mainly went with the Fred Olsen company just because they seem to be the most frequent. Quite often they would only operate 1 to 2 times per day, meaning if you didn't get your timing right, you would sometimes have to wait a whole day for the next ferry. So if you're doing this hike, make sure you plan accordingly. Island analysis. So the GR131 begins in Lanzarote before moving on to Fuerteventura, Gran Canaria, Tenerife, La Gomera, La Palma, and finally El Hierro. As I mentioned, I was unable to complete the last 2 islands due to time constraints. Lanzarote. Lanzarote was certainly an interesting island, unlike anywhere else I've ever been. When I think of Lanzarote, I think of the black volcanic soil, the endless desert, and also the unique farming crops with the plants dug in the shallow wells to protect them from the whipping sands. I wild camped one night and stayed in a B&B the second night. The GR131 passes through plenty of towns on Lanzarote, which makes it easy to resupply for food and water. The second half of the island was definitely my favourite, with more desolate and unique landscapes and more mountains. I found Lanzarote to be one of the most quiet islands in terms of tourism and seeing other people out on the trail. The trail on Lanzarote finishes at the beachside resort town of Playa Blanca, where you can get a quick 45-minute ferry over to Fuerteventura. This is probably the most convenient ferry crossing I found out of all of the islands. Fuerteventura. So I would classify Fuerteventura as another desert hike, though it has the more yellowy sand, is more mountainous, and has slightly more vegetation than the trail on Lanzarote. The trailhead begins in the beachside resort town of Carlajo, which is where the ferry drops you. So I stayed in a B&B the first night and wild camped the remaining 3 nights whilst on the trail. I found the midsection of the island to be the highlight, where you pass through mountains, rugged exposed desert, and also friendly isolated villages. I finished in the resort town of and got a ferry over to the next island the following morning. The official trail spends an extra day travelling to the southern tip of Fuerteventura, but given logistical issues getting back to Morrojable to get the ferry, I decided to leave that section of the trail out. Gran Canaria. Now, Gran Canaria is probably one of my favourite islands on the GR131. The ferry drops you off on the east of the island in the capital of Las Palmas. You then get a bus to the south to the town of Masapalamas, which is where the trail for the GR131 commences. The first section is a punishing road walk, which was probably my least favourite part of the island. Once you reach the pine forest, however, the landscapes become much more scenic and continue to only improve as you keep going up into the Kumba Highlands of the island. The island is very green and almost has an alpine feel compared to the previous 2 desert island hikes. I found the people up in the highland villages to be very welcoming and had lots of tasty salamis, cheeses and breads to keep me fueled whilst I was on the trail. So I stayed in a B&B for 1 night and spent the other 2 nights out wild camping. The trail finishes on the opposite side of the island at a portside town, which is where you conveniently get a ferry over to the next island on the GR131, Tenerife. So the TD National Park on Tenerife was probably my second favourite part of the GR131. It's just such a unique and awesome landscape to walk through, and having Mount TD, which is the largest mountain on Spanish territory, towering above you the whole time is pretty cool. You do, however, have to spend 2 days slogging it through pine forest to reach this section. Over the 2 days, there were a couple of spots with some pretty cool views of the clouds below and of Mount Teide, but overall, for me, I found these 2 days quite repetitive. The last section to Arona is again through a section of pine forest, but as you start to descend out of the mountains, you go through some pretty special landscapes as well. I spent all 3 nights wild camping whilst on the trail, whilst at the end of the trail in Arona, I stayed in a B&B. From Arona, you get a bus down to Los Cristianos, which is where you can get a ferry to the next island, La Gomera. La Gomera is definitely in the top 3 favourite islands of mine. It's very mountainous, it has lots of dense green vegetation, and it can be completed in 2 days. Though the first section is around 2,000 metres of incline and around 27 kilometres of distance. There were quite a few day trippers out on certain sections of the island, probably more so than other islands. This is probably because La Gomera is just stunning, and it also has very good accessibility via road. The ferry from Tenerife drops you at the capital of San Sebastian, which is where the GR131 begins. I wild camped the one night that I spent on La Gomera. I finished the trail at Vallehermoso, which is where the buses run from, and got a bus back to San Sebastian and stayed overnight before getting the ferry the following day. Conclusion. In total, I hiked about 450 kilometres or 280 miles. The GR131 is simply just a stunning trail that passes through a vast array of different landscapes and microclimates. During my time on the trail, I walked across deserts, mountains, volcanoes, pine forests, rainforests, and centuries-old villages. It was winter when I did this hike, and I pretty much had sunshine every single day except for 1 or 2. The nights were quite chilly, but during the day it was absolutely perfect temperature for hiking. The only concern that I had was not planning my ferry crossings properly. In summary, if you're looking for a unique long distance through hike to do in the Northern Hemisphere winter, I don't think you will find a better trail. Just plan your ferry crossings accordingly and give yourself enough time to do it. If you have any further questions about the trail or just hiking in the Canary Islands in general, don't hesitate to drop a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So what's next? So I have a few plans in mind. As we exit winter, my next hike is likely going to be the Cape Wrath Trail, which is up in Scotland. Ever since the Skye Trail, I've been meaning to get back to Scotland to do the Cape Wrath Trail. I've heard only great things about the trail, and Scotland is just such an amazing place to be, especially when you're out hiking solo. In the meantime, I'll be working in my day job. I'll probably also put together a full silent hiking film of my GR131 experience. So no vlogging, and very similar to what you'd expect from Craig Adams, who is obviously a huge inspiration for my channel. I'm really starting to get into photographing the landscapes whilst I'm on my hikes. I normally post them on my Instagram stories or on my website live whilst I'm on the trail. So you can stay up to date as to where I am on the trails by following my Instagram or keeping an eye on my website. So until the next video, guys, I hope you keep well. Thanks for watching, especially if you've made it this far, and I appreciate all the support, comments and likes, and everyone who's subscribed so far. It's really rewarding to see my channel slowly growing, and I hope to continue to do that over the next few videos with the next hikes that come up. So yeah, until the next one, I will see you later. Bye.